Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or maybe even good night. I'm Dr. Andrew Franklin. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Psychology at Norfolk State University. And this is just a small mini presentation designed to present to some and reintroduce to others the integrative learning value rubric. Value is a mnemonic and it stands for valid assessment and learning in undergraduate education. And it's a rubric that I came across as a result of attending a workshop in the first week of August in summer 2020. This was a workshop that was offered by the Association of American Colleges and Universities, in particular, the CIO and Vice President of Quality and Advocacy and LEAP initiatives, Dr. C. Edward Watson, held the workshop. And LEAP is a mnemonic as well. So that stands for Liberal Education in America's Promise. And AACU basically has this whole initiative where they are focused on deepening students' knowledge as well as increasing the likelihood that they'll persist in their academic studies throughout their undergraduate careers. So I had the awesome opportunity to attend this workshop with some of my amazing colleagues as a result of Dr. Robin Marable. She is the Associate Director of Student Pathways and Academic Formation at Norfolk State University. And this was a great workshop. I found out that this rubric was a culmination of work that involved lots of discussions with educators as well as lots of discussions with employers. Employers shared with AACU some of the things that they were facing in their everyday affairs. They talked at length about how the problems are much more complex and how they need their undergraduate prospective students to be prepared to solve those problems with increased knowledge, skills, abilities, characteristics, and all of that. And then educators talked about some of the things that they were seeing in the classroom as well, in terms of the rubrics that they use, essential learning outcomes that they think are key, etc. And as a result of that conversation, lots of essential learning outcomes were generated. These essential learning outcomes focused on the knowledge that students needed to have in regard to their particular milieu. It also focused on intellectual and practical skills that students need to have in regard to inquiring, analyzing, critically thinking, communicating effectively, whether it's orally or whether it's graphically. It also dealt with an essential learning outcome that's very much focused on civic knowledge and engagement on a local level as well as a global level, teamwork skills, ethical reasoning, cultural competency that starts with awareness. And then finally, both educators and employees acknowledge that educators and employers, excuse me, acknowledge that students need to be able to synthesize and integrate a great deal of information. So all of us know what it's like to be going through an undergraduate career, and you're in the forest and you're weaving your way through the forest, just following whatever path is laid out before you. That would be the curriculum. Sometimes it can be really hard to see the forest from the trees. When you're kind of going through it, all of these courses that you're taking can look very disparate. You know, the oak tree looks different from the mahogany tree, right? But this rubric is designed to get instructors to think about how to give the students kind of a bird's eye view, how to give them a look at the forest. In other words, how do you get students to make connections across the curriculum? How do you get these students to not just look at simple connections, simple ideas, but to really make these wide sweeping connections across maybe a course they had in their freshman year with something that they're now taking in their junior year? So, undoubtedly, a lot of this, folks, is embedded in the curriculums that we have already in regard to prerequisites and students need to take certain courses before they take your course. I don't know why I just explained that. But this is designed to kind of get instructors to do this in almost every course so that we're not scrambling trying to do this once students get to their capstone. By then, I mean, the student is just ready to cross the finish line and they don't care how gracefully they do it. And we want to make sure that long before they get to that finish line, that they're already starting to integrate and synthesize information. So if you take a look at the rubric, you'll see that it consists of 5 different types of criteria. There's connections to experiences, there's connections to discipline, there's transfer, and you can read on. I don't need to keep going. So I paused the video because I know your next question is, where can I find this rubric? I mean, you are literally salivating to the point where saliva is running down your bottom lip, it's hitting your chin, it's dripping off your chin, it's falling into the keys on your keyboard. Electrical sparks are flying because you want to know where to get this rubric. I got you. If I can be colloquial for a second. I got you. I understand. Listen, you can find this rubric. I'm not going to spell it out. You see it. Okay, fine. I'll spell it out. www.aacu.org/value/rubric/integrative-learning. That's where you can find this rubric, folks. You can actually get a copy of it and modify it for whatever purpose you have in mind. You can get it in PDF form as well as you can get a document. Let's go back to the PDF. Now, folks, this is just one of 16 rubrics that AACU has generated. Some of the other rubrics focus on specific essential learning outcomes. One in particular that I really like, I really value, no pun intended, is the ethical reasoning value rubric. I really like this. As I was talking about earlier, ethical decision making oftentimes starts with awareness, and it has that within the criteria, understanding different ethical perspectives, concepts, ethical issue recognition, and I'm not going to read again. You guys can read. So it's a tremendous rubric that can serve as a springboard to generating good critical assignments for research-based courses, um, uh, human relations courses, be them counseling or clinical in nature. I mean, there's just so many different ways you can go with ethics, right? So great rubric. Again, the integrative learning value rubric is just one of 16 that AACU has. So as I wrap up this presentation, I just wanted to grab you by the collar and bring you into some of the conversations we were having during this continuing education workshop. One of the conversations we were having was one that was semantic in nature. There were some folks that were talking about how within their particular milieu, a benchmark is thought to be the standard that the student is reaching. In other words, it's the standard of excellence. It's what they need to basically attain in order to move forward. In this particular rubric, it almost looks like the baseline. But in fact, if the student doesn't do anything, they would just get a zero. For example, this is connections to experience. You got benchmark and it's one. It's the lowest number within the rubric, and it says identifies connections between life experiences and those academic texts and ideas perceived as similar and related to own interests. Yes, I just read you the slide again. Anyway, point being is that it's just the semantic issue, folks. Here, the kind of the tip of the iceberg, the point of excellence is the capstone for here. So we just got some. You might run into some semantic differences. Benchmark being at the lower end may throw some folks off, but don't let it throw you off too much. You can modify this rubric to your liking. So maybe 1 through 4 doesn't really work for you. Maybe you want to increase the intervals across these different levels of performance. So you can certainly do that. And then it may be the case that you're not necessarily trying to get students to a capstone level, but maybe you're trying to get them to a 3 milestone level. So you're trying to get them there. So they don't need to, maybe for your particular course, maybe it's a 200 level course, you don't need them necessarily to meaningfully synthesize connections, dot, 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 ellipses, but rather you would be content with them just effectively selecting and developing examples of life experiences, etc. Right? So that's perfectly fine. You can modify the rubric and establish what standard of excellence your students need to attain. How am I using the rubric? I'm not. No, I am using the rubric. I'm using it in my statistics course, and I'm using it as well as I'm using it in my psychology of religion course as well. In statistics, with connections to experience, I'm showing students how to connect statistical concepts to real world experiences, be it polling data as it relates to the upcoming elections, or be it statistics related to what happens in Las Vegas, because we all know that what happens in Las Vegas doesn't necessarily stay in Las Vegas. Or it could be something related to statistics that they see on the news, right? So I have students actually find relevant variables and talk about them in the context of a discussion board forum or maybe even in class. And then in doing that, we also rope in other course content like scales of measurement, connections to discipline. Psychology is so vast. There's so many different subfields of psychology. So a lot of the problems that students are presented with are naturally from other courses that they've had within their psychology curriculum. So that works. And also getting them to make connections as well. So getting them to take a lot of the information that maybe they gleaned or learned about research methods from other courses, from other courses like Introduction to Psychology, and getting them to work that into statistics is a way to help them make connections across discipline. And then for my colleagues outside of psychology, I mean, you guys are teaching a bunch of courses that could easily overlap with psychology, right? Especially my interdisciplinary studies folks. So getting students to make connections there. Sometimes they do this spontaneously, and it provides such a rich environment for us to dialogue about whatever phenomenon they're bringing to the table. Transferring, my students are applying statistical concepts, problems into the chapter problems that are math based, and then getting them to reflect on their decision making process when they choose certain statistical techniques to solve research scenarios. That is a way in which I'm kind of using this rubric to generate assignments and evaluate the students' assignments. So just wanted to throw out something that was an example of how I'm using this thing. Thank you for click and play. I really appreciate it.